So I'm back by the mirror ball. As you can see, I'm filming the turbines today because we have quite a large inferior mirage that's going off when we look at Barrow in Furness. But I thought this might be a good view to see the inferior mirage and the effects that that has on the water. If you pay attention to the water itself, you'll see that the gap between the sky and the sea, you'll see this, what I would call fake waves. You'll see that the blue, or the darker colour of the sea, is intermittently overlapped by the sky above it, and it causes the wave to appear much higher than the sky as it overlaps it. The waves are dancing, and clearly we know that the body of water is a solid thing, you know, I mean, there's no gaps in the water, so this is an optical effect. You'll see the dancing around of the fake waves. Now all that is that's the inferior mirage, and that's the effect that it has on the water. Nothing to do with earth curve or anything like that. It's just another very good example of the effects of looking at things over water. Now it's really cold today, it's about 5 degrees actually. It said so in the car on the way down here. But this has been an effect that I've seen in warm weather, cold weather, freezing weather actually. I mean, last year for instance, I came down just before Christmas. It was absolutely bitter. But yeah, this is something that I have talked about in the past, and this is the when you actually see those higher waves, that's actually the real water. That's the real sea. It's beyond where you would think the horizon actually is. So the dancing waves that you see, the real water line, is continuing to go further and further and further. It's just that it's cut off by an inferior mirage. Once you get into that very narrow viewing angle, as things go further and further away, the angle gets shorter and shorter, and it reaches this point where the angle is so shallow that an inferior mirage forms. Now you've seen all the inferior mirages before on buildings and stuff like this, but this is basically an inferior mirage of the sea. So all these dancing waves that I've talked about in the past, which are very clear in this video, is just an effect of the mirage of the sky overlapping the sea. Let me show you the building. Well, there is no buildings of Barrow to be seen, but you can actually see how deep the inferior mirage is when you look over here at Barrow in Furness. You see the mountain and the curve back, the mirror reflection of the mountain above it. Well, obviously, as you can see, the dancing waves are there too. The sea stretches beyond that. You know, we are at high tide right now, and you can see the inferior mirage overlapping the actual ocean itself. So it's a very clear visual effect that helps explain a lot of things when you're trying to view things over water. Boats could get lost in that. In fact, I've got videos of boats being hidden by the inferior mirage, and this is a very good example of this effect. I mean, it can hide the ocean. It is here right now hiding the ocean. Every reason to expect, as it does with the footage that I've shown, hides boats and all sorts. Of course, that inferior mirage is very deep today. I don't even believe we can see the tower. Oh, maybe we just can. Maybe that is just the tower, the chimney stacks of Barrow in Furness. over there. Can you see the dancing waves? Now, obviously the rest of the buildings we can no longer see. Nothing is there. And one thing we have to remember as well is that the ocean, I mean today we have a really big swell actually. It's quite the swell. If I show you the ocean down here, you might get to see this. I would hazard a guess right now that we've probably got at least a metre or two of swell. It's quite deceptive to actually see it from here, to actually get an idea of just how big it is. But you can see those big waves pulling through. That's the swell, and the little waves at the top is the chop. Well, the whole ocean is moving. You know, it's not a stationary thing, it's not a flat thing. If you look at the Earth curve calculator, for instance, they want you to envisage a flat surface. So if you look at the ball model that they have, it's a sphere, and it's straight sphere sort of thing, with no bulges on top of it, no rolling waves, no moving of the ocean, nothing. Now, once you start inputting that into the data, it kind of screws it up for the globe, quite substantially actually. Especially, you know, when you see the Muppet vision that they try to get every flat earther to see from the side on. They always do a very straight line. It has no waves on it, no movement of the ocean, nothing like that. Now, this is just one effect. You know, this is one effect, the swell and the waves. But you have other things to consider. There's shoaling. I would highly recommend that people look into the effects of shoaling and the effects that has on the water. Now, places like Australia and Hawaii, things like that, they have very steep land masses that run off just a few miles out to sea, and as the ocean pushes in and recedes, and that friction on the seabed causes an effect called shoaling. Now that amplifies the height of the water in those locations quite substantially, and that's totally different to swell and the waves on top, the chop. So when you start adding all these things in, it's no wonder that you encounter blockage. And it's very typical in places like Australia, New Zealand, places like that, Hawaii, where you actually see boats behind physical water. Whereas we don't get to see that here. We don't get to see boats behind physical water where I live. Now, the reason for that's pretty simple. I think the depth, basically from here all the way to the Isle of Man, at a maximum gets to about 80 metres. That's it. So it's a pretty flat, low-lying topography underneath the water. And that doesn't cause the shoaling effect here, which is why, you know, I see long distances here. Sandra P900 Coolpix too, she sees very long distances from here. It's just an effect that should be included in places that has this type of terrain. Again, you can check my videos on shoaling for a deeper explanation of that. But yeah, I mean, there's a whole host of reasons to look into why you actually see blockage over water. Typically, as I say, here in where I live, we always seem to get this inferior mirage. It's very rare that we ever get a clear line of sight, and when we do, of course, you know, you get the 1-inch observations, you get the 1-foot observations, where you're seeing 18 miles, 20 miles, 24 miles even, shore to shore. So That's just the effect. You know, you got to have the right conditions to see very far. So go and check your swell reports before you actually set off. Check the wind speed as well, because the wind speed will create the chop. Check where you actually live. You know, check the depths of the seabed from where you're actually trying to film from. And when you start looking into all this, you'll realise and you'll come to understand why in certain places you see blockage and why in certain places you don't. It's just something that, you know, everyone should be aware of when they're actually going out and filming. Red Pill Philosophy did a video, again it was across a very shallow seabed, and he was able to see tremendous distances too. I think it was 18-20 miles, you know, again just on a day when there was no swell. If you actually watch his video, the ocean is very, very, very still, and on that particular day, with the right temperature conditions, you were just able to see a very, very long way. Now, I've still never seen any kind of looming. That's never ever happened. It's never been demonstrated to me. I've never seen a video that's able to do that. Yes, you can manipulate a light beam, or you can manipulate a laser beam. You can manipulate it, of course you can. You can bend it into a different direction, but that isn't the same as looking at a building. That isn't the same as looking at anything solid in the distance and actually seeing it being physically lifted up beyond Earth curvature. That's never been demonstrated. It's never been shown. I've never ever seen it. In fact, again, refer back to my videos where I have the star post in the foreground and the building's a barrel behind. There is never any difference between those two objects. We have a star post that's 4 miles away, and we have Barrow in Furness that's 18 miles away, and they never change. They never change any distances or any kind of not the distances, but they never change any relative positions to each other. So still waiting for proof of looming from the globe. But what we can demonstrate as flat earthers is that the ocean, when they try to put us on a Muppet vision view from a side-on view, and they try to say that it's flat when we say it's flat, they try to put a flat straight line across and say this is what you should see. No, because as you can see right now, the ocean is always moving. The topography of the land has a huge effect on the motions of the water. And you can never ever say as flat earthers that the ocean is flat when you're trying to look across it. It doesn't happen, so don't fall into that trap. Don't fall into it of saying, okay, put me in Muppet vision with a straight line, because that isn't our world. That isn't reality. That's just their model, their drawings, their sketches, how they perceive it to be. Because for some reason they don't have this ability to understand that water moves and the ocean isn't flat. Bodies of water as a whole, with no forces acting on them, will be flat. But those conditions are very, very far and few between. And when we get these mill pond conditions with the right temperatures, we just see a very, very long way. Totally at odds with the globe. Now, that can't happen on a globe because, you know, as I say, there's no proof of looming. Nobody's been able to demonstrate to me looming, ever. Manipulate a light beam? Sure. Yeah, you can do that. But can you show me a building literally being lifted up beyond Earth curve? No. It's never been able to be demonstrated, so that 7.6R nonsense which Mick West puts into his Earth curve calculator is absolute hogwash. So anyway, my hand's getting a little bit cold now, so I will actually show you where I am. Obviously at the mirror ball, and I was filming from exactly the same post as I was on my last video. Obviously the tide is different this time. I think it's high tide, I think it was mid tide last time, so there is going to be a slight difference as to how much you can actually see of this landmass over here. But all in all, just another example of the inferior mirage blocking things, and an explanation as to why we shouldn't fall into the trap of listening to these globe heads when they try to put you in a orthographic view with a straight line. So, thanks very much, and I'll see you all in the next one.